डायरेक्ट शुरू करें फिर ओशनोग्राफी। हाँ वही तो मैं सोच रहा था कि
कल ये क्वेश्चन जब दिए गए थे 8-10 उसमें थर्ड नियरेस्ट प्लैनेट टू अर्थ वो अर्थ होगा।
थर्ड फ्रॉम सन।
हाँ
हाँ
मास लगेगा।
नहीं तो कहीं और से दिया होगा। थर्ड नियरेस्ट प्लैनेट फ्रॉम सन, मरकरी, वीनस, अर्थ।
और एक और क्वेश्चन उसमें मतलब गलती किया गया ये रोटे अर्थ की मूवमेंट सन के अराउंड रोटेशन होगा।
रिवोल्यूशन है,
रिवोल्यूशन तो एक्सिस के अराउंड होगा।
रोटेशन।
एक्सिस के अराउंड रोटेशन और सन के अराउंड
रिवोल्यूशन। वो गलत नहीं है, वो आप गलत है। ठीक है। ओशनोग्राफी scientific study of the ocean that includes water as well as geology, right? With respect to water, we have the properties, especially salinity, current, waves and tides. Geology is the ocean bottom relief, that's what we call. Besides ocean resources, then we have ocean deposits. Then a special discussion on Indian Ocean, geopolitics, resources, sea line communication. These will be the topics of discussion in oceanography. Let's start with the geological and political zoning. First is the political zoning of ocean water. That means who owns the ocean. And the extension of ownership right. And very often we come across the conflicted situation between the countries. Right, that like for example fishermen getting caught in the water of maybe Pakistan. Pakistani fishermen get caught into the Indian navigational areas. Same is true about Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and all. Right, so why do and when do they are caught? When it is supposed that they have crossed their limit. So that limitation has been very subjective and a big intense discussion at the international forum as well. In the historical past, it used to happen that for navigation, any ship which is passing, they were told as per convention, there was no legally binding things, but as per convention, you should not touch or come as close to the oceanic coast of a continental portion of any country, which is called cannon shot distance. That up till what cannon can shoot you. Right. Basic aim at that time was to identify and differentiate between the enemy and friends. For example, if the travel is free up till the very coastline of any country, so what will happen, you may not know that who are coming to attack, who are coming to trade. On the pretense of trade also they can come, right? Because ocean was not considered as a source of big resource at that time. But later on, especially in the second half of 20th century, when the technological advancement took place at the international level, several countries started exploiting resources from ocean, right? Especially fishes and other biotic communities, seaweeds, aquacultures and all. So what happened, the developed countries, especially Japan, Russia, China, US, used to travel all the way in the other ocean waters. Like Japanese trawlers move till Australian waters. So the countries which were not able to exploit properly the resources, they started complaining about it. And lots of conflict used to take place between the fishermen of the two countries. Like for example, Japanese Russian fleets used to be there till African coast. Chinese used to be there in Vietnam waters and Southeast Asian waters. So they started objecting it. With lots of discussions, finally in 1982, a convention was signed between most of the countries of UN, that is UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on Law of the Seas, which was properly implemented in 1994. Still there are good number of countries which are not signatory to it, especially like US, even China is not signatory. China is a signatory of it. Doesn't follow, that's a different issue. It has its own interpretation of that. There are a lot of ambiguities about it. Like for example, extension of continental shelf itself is a subjective matter that several countries had decided on their own, right? But that has definitely reduced good number of conflicts and has given a clear-cut demarcation and legal sanctions to the countries that fine, even if they have not signed, they use the convention to be assertive on their rights about the coastal zones, right? And it has delineated the ocean surface and the ocean water, and several terms are used. First one is this, what you call territorial water. Second one is called contiguous zone. Third is called exclusive economic zone, EEZ. Fourth is called high seas. Right? If you look at this, generally this is the bottom topography of the ocean, starting with the sea level, right? So first 12 nautical mile. Nautical mile is the unit to measure distance over the ocean surface. 1 nautical mile is equal to roughly around 1.8 kilometers, right? So 12 nautical mile is the first zone, that is contiguous zone. Then from here till here, another 12 nautical mile is the, generally that will not extend in the geographical features like this, they will go like this. Another second zone, that is contiguous zone. Then starting from here till 200 nautical mile, it is EEZ. Beyond this, it is called high seas. Starting from the baseline, the term baseline, coastline and shoreline. We'll try to differentiate between these terms. The measure starts from what we call baseline. So there are three terms in terms of that: baseline, coastline and shoreline. What is a coastline? Some of you might be aware of it. Yes. till the point where the entry of ocean water is maximum towards the continental area. Like we can demarcate that, find this point, you can demarcate that line and draw a line which separates the continental portion and ocean perfectly in the normal condition. That means from that point there won't be entry of ocean water into the continental areas in the normal conditions, unless until extraordinary waves, cyclonic waves or tsunamis come, they will be exactly right there. Right. So till there, so that is the line. That will be a fixed line. That's what you call coastline. We can imagine, like for example, this is the slope of the continental areas. So if we imagine that this portion, this point is the outer boundary which separates the continent and the ocean water in normal circumstances. For example, high tide level, that will be maximum water. Thereafter, the ocean water entry will not be there. That means maximum sea level at any given area in any point of time. That is called coastline. No further entry of ocean water beyond that. Right? That is coastline. So coastline will be a fixed line. Right? What is shoreline? Because sea level over the period of time within a day itself is not fixed. They keep on changing as per the high tide and low tide level. Right? So that change is very gradual. It's not like that right now here and suddenly it will be here. It retreats gradually and it moves up gradually as well. So at different point of time in a day, the sea level will be different. Hopefully we understand. So that's what we call shoreline. Shoreline is a dynamic term which keeps on changing. So different point of time, shoreline will be different. Coastline is fixed. Shoreline is the sea level at any given point of time. Which changes between high tide and low tide. Can we understand? High tide and low tide. That means it is a dynamic term. It is not fixed. It is dynamic within a day itself. But that one is fixed. So at high tide level, coastline and shoreline is same. Hopefully we are clear about it. Let's say suppose along the coastal area, this is the low tide level and this is the high tide level. Right? So this will keep on changing at different point of time. So that is the maximum zone of dynamism of ocean water. This zone where shoreline keeps on changing is called shore zone. And away from this shore zone is that's what we call offshore zone. So actual normal waves will keep on attacking within the shore zone itself, right? So there may be a question that the most fundamental area where coastal landforms will be formed will be shore zone area, right? All the landforms generally, especially the erosional kind of landforms, will be formed in the shore zone, right? Now, how it is different from baseline, or how baseline is different from shoreline and coastline. Baseline is basically a straight line drawn in the ocean water. to avoid zigzag as per the coastal topography. Let's say, suppose a coastal area is drawn like this. So coastal area may not be very smooth and very straight. It may be highly zigzagged, right? So the shoreline will be according to the coast, and coastline also will be according to this only, right? So that will be zigzag. So when you start measuring from here, the measurement will be different. When you start from here, measurement will be different. When you start here, measurement will be different. So to avoid that zigzag, a straight line is drawn generally in the outer margin of the zigzag portion of the coastal landforms, right? And that's what we call baseline. Hope we can understand it. That's what we call baseline. And from baseline, these political zonings are measured. Like when you try to find out 12 nautical miles, you will start from here, not from here. So, and baseline beyond, it will be measured, and that's why everywhere it will be roughly a straight line. Hope you understand, right? And the water behind the baseline towards the continent is called internal water. Very often you will come across these terms also, like the Italian mariners, which committed a crime in the Indian Ocean, especially along the coast of Kerala. Right? Why Indian government is punishing as per the law of the land? Why Italian government is requesting that they should not be given a capital punishment? Because for the crime of murder, we have the provision of capital punishment, but Italian judiciary doesn't have that provision. So that's why they are requesting. Though again the situation is totally different, that now they are running away from the Indian judiciary. Right? So
these backwaters or lagoons come under
internal waters. They will be under the internal waters. They will not be part of the measuring of the territorial water. Right? So territorial water extend from the baseline to 12 nautical miles. Right? Then from here to another 12 nautical mile is the generally contiguous zone. Then when exclusive economic zone, it is measured from baseline to the next 200 nautical mile. That is EEZ. Beyond this, we have high seas. High seas are basically similar to that of highways. Generally, when you travel on the highways, even if you cross different states, the police generally don't check you up unless until they are very sure about something fishy around. Generally, they don't check. They have a special highway patrolling, right, which takes care of different issues. So highways are relatively free for travel. Similarly, when we say high seas, they are the area which are free for shipping and transportation by any country. For example, even if the enemy country's ship is passing through this, the country doesn't have any right to check them, right? Unless until they are committing again some criminal offense. Then again, as per the international law, you have to deal things with that, right? So in the territorial water, I hope we can understand the term itself. Territory means just like a land, right? Territory. It is just like the extension of the land of the continent, except the fact that that is covered under water. For all practical purposes, both territorial water and contiguous zone is extension of the continent. Sorry, except the fact that that is covered under water. Even not the surface, but also the space belongs to the country. For any aeroplane or any fighter ships or any any kind of use of airspace has also be permitted from the country itself. Otherwise, you are violating the space of that country. Right? That's where islands becomes very important. If you have good number of islands, then you have huge amount of area under your surveillance and your possession also. So territorial water and contiguous zone is in continuity of the territorial water, that is contiguous zone. Right? Both are roughly similar except in the fact that in the case of territorial water, the restrictions or the laws are very strict, that entry without permission will be considered as violation of rules and regulations. In contiguous zone, the situation is similar except the fact that the countries are supposed to be relatively liberal for transportation of ships. Right? A very good example we can take is, like, for example, any airport. Like, I take example of, let's say, Delhi airport. So in Delhi airport, somebody has come, foreigners, citizen, has dropped down at Delhi airport. When the officials are asking for visa, he or she doesn't have, right, permission to enter into the country. So what very often is done is that they are sent back by the other plane to their own country. Or at the best, their ambassadors and all are consulted, and they are told that your citizen has reached in my airport without valid visa. So if visa is granted, it is fine. If not, he or she has to go back. But suppose if somehow they get out of the airport and get caught on the Delhi road without visa, so he or she definitely will be tried as per the law of the land. So that is the fundamental difference between territorial water and contiguous zone. In contiguous zone, the legal authorities are a bit liberal for the use of, especially for transportation purpose. But in territorial water, you have already violated it. Right? Some countries reduces the territorial water. Like, for example, US has just 5 nautical miles as territorial water, but extension is 19 kilometers of contiguous zone. Basically, for the ships to pass as close as to the coast. So you have advantage of it. When ships are passing very close to your coast, the advantage is economic. The disadvantage is that might be enemy ship. Right? So when you are confident as far as your coastal security is concerned, you allow the extension of contiguous zone. What is the economic benefit? If they are passing very close to that, the ports can be used as dhabas. When you are traveling, say, on the national highway from Delhi to Jaipur, there are several dhabas. Right? The port which are exclusively used as dhabas are called port of call. They are exclusive for the purpose of refueling, for sometimes a stay over, for example, for fooding, for refueling, for some problems has come to the ships and all, for rectification, repair and all. Sagarmala project is a much bigger initiative than the simple port of call. Sagarmala project is one component of it is using as a port of call. But they are basically strengthening the whole port system and increasing greater connectivity and modernization. Basically interconnecting that linkages. That's why we have dry ports also, the concept of dry port. Any port which are located in the continental portion is called. Delhi is also a dry port. Delhi has been used for several times. If you want to send your cargo through marine routes, you can deposit in Delhi also. We do have custom officials in Delhi itself. So that's dry port. Hopefully we understand territorial water and contiguous zone. Right? The next is exclusive economic zone. Exclusive economic zone. That means the zone which provides you exclusive right over the economic resources. As simple as that. All the resources, oceanic resources, which are lying within that zone is a property of the country. That's what we mean by exclusive economic zone. Generally free for transportation. Generally. Even the country has right to check and all in that zone, unlike high seas. But generally free for transportation. And that is where we have issues with respect to the fishermen getting caught, because all the biotic or abiotic communities, there are good number of biotic communities found in the ocean surface and under the ocean, and then you have abiotic community as well, minerals and all. So obviously that are the resources to the country, that's the property of the country. So any fisherman entering into your exclusive economic zone will be considered as a violator of the law. And in the middle of the ocean, when the extension is there, sometimes very often you don't really realize. If you travel in the ocean, say 10 kilometers, you will not be able to actually understand that where you are located. You have GPS and all, so that keeps on telling you present day. Sometimes what happens, the fishes moves in flocks. So keep on chasing that group of fishes, and ultimately you enter into others' water. That sometimes basically out of ignorance and out of flow also the fisherman moves, especially when the coastal zone is demarcated with a very small area, like Sri Lanka and India is very close. The narrow Pak Strait, Pakistan, and just basically Pakistani fishermen or Indian fishermen getting caught by Pakistanis, that will be close to Gujarat area because they are narrow then. Same is true about Bangladesh and West Bengal. So that's how they get caught in the exclusive economic zones. And if you look at the present day circumstances, when there is a continuous depletion of resources over the continent, all the countries have started looking towards the oceans. And that's how the importance of resources of ocean is increasing day by day. It is believed that ocean possess far more amount of resources, especially metallic mineral resources. Natural gas and crude oil has already been exploited. So, but the future resources, especially mineral resources, are there under the water. The only problem is that technological inefficiency to exploit those resources at such a greater depth. Right? That's how. But when you talk about the geopolitics, like for example South China Sea. So South China Sea, if you talk about, that has more to do with the hegemony of the area and the increasing importance of that area. In the future, let's say for example Indian Ocean and South China Sea, in the future the two big countries of the world, and when we say big in terms of economic parlance, would be India and China. Right? So this whole zone will be very, very vital for transportation, shipping, trading and all. That's why the importance of these regions have been continuously increasing. And hence China, as a obviously larger share of the economic resources in the world, they are being more assertive. They are trying to catch up more amount of islands so that they can have their own port of call and they can generate that. That's why China is making that pearl of a string of pearls around India, basically so that they can have control over the trade. Like they are making in Myanmar, then you have Sri Lanka, then Pakistan, then good number of countries in Africa also encircling. That is that's what you call oceanic silk route also. Right? If you have a port, let's say for example, that's called invisible trades also in economy. For example, ships are staying for 1 hour at Mumbai port. Right? So what do you do in dhaba? All of you have the experience. You go eat something. So generally charge are much, much higher. Right? You don't mind paying $150 for dal tadka, which might be you get just 100 meters away from the village, you will get in 60 rupees. Right? They will be charging 5-star rate without giving you facilities of 5-star. So that's what and even some dhabas may have some other khilona, instruments, torches, batteries and all. Right? So that's how the port of call are important source of foreign exchange. Very, very important source of foreign exchange. So it is not only the port or the trading points, but also an important source of earning as invisible trades. Just imagine a ship has started from Suez Canal in Egypt, and they are taking the cargoes to China. So in the middle, they'll definitely want good number of supplies. They may not have sufficient amount of fuel to run continuously till that period. Then foods and all stuffs. Maybe if they want fresh foods, when they enter into airport, they might be getting some fresh foods. हो सकता है कुछ और ख़त्म हो गया हो, फ्यूल ख़त्म हो गया हो सकता है टी शर्ट पड़ी हुई हो वहाँ, उसका 2 ख़राब हो गया तो उनका 2 टी शर्ट भी ले लो, 2 कपड़े भी ले लो, 1-2 शराब की बॉटल ले लो, and all that. So obviously they'll keep on giving you good amount of resources. So that's the role of port in the present day, is continuously increasing. That is how Singapore has become Singapore. Singapore has grown only because its location. Its location is so vital in the Malacca Strait that, and the only source of income is invisible trades. And they are one of the highest per capita income country of the world. Singapore is basically a very good example of port of call, right? Then you have geological zoning. In geological zoning we have again few areas: continental shelf, continental slope, continental rise, and the fourth one is called abyssal plain, which are not literally a plain, or deep sea plain. Deep sea plain is a much bigger term than abyssal plain. Deep sea plain includes almost all the features. This is what we call hypsographic curve. Showing the height over the continent and depth in the ocean water is called hypsographic curve. This portion is called continental shelf. This is called continental slope. This is called continental rise, and this is the deep sea plain. Deep sea plain has various different features and unique features into it. Especially some of them we have already discussed, that mid-oceanic ridges, sea mounts, then you have guyads, then we have various kind of reefs, large variety of, that's coral reef, one of the topic we missed in, that we'll be discussing as well. Guyads are the flat top sea mounts. Then we have abyssal hills also. These are the features generally found in the deep sea plain. One of the most important feature again here are trenches. Except coral reefs, I hope all of the term we are aware of, right? The flat top sea mounts. Mountains and hills, the fundamental difference between mountain and hill is the height. And when with the table-like features, when because of erosion, the top of sea mount peak is eroded and they are made flat. That is again under the water, they are called guyads. Right?
So what is sills? Water sills? There is a term sills in water.
Which shell you talk? Shell or cell?
Sill.
S-E-A-L-L.
S-I-L-L.
Sill. Sill is the wave. or the sill is also the a fish, a kind of fish.
A mountain in between oceans.
No, sills and dikes.
Sir,
That is volcanic
sir,
zone.
नहीं, ocean में सर है कि स्ट्रेट ऑफ जिब्राल्टर जो है उसमें जो टॉप 400 मीटर एक्सेसिबल है तो इसलिए तो उसमें ओशन वाटर इंटरचेंज नहीं हो पाता.
So that's what sill is, basically the volcanic landform.
Under
Volcanic landforms which is exposed. That will be sill only, the deposition of volcanic landform. That remains the same sill. Sills and dikes. So when sills are exposed, they will not allow the water to exchange.
particular depth होती है कि like there is between 3,000 to 6,000 meter. Is there any particular depth
Of these regions. Yes, we will be talking about that. Now, the demarcation of continental shelf. How the continental shelves are demarcated. We can see from the curve itself that continental shelf is very gently sloping area. Shallow water area, right? The demarcation line is, that's what you call photic zone. This is the primary criteria to demarcate or delineate the continental shelf. Photic zone, I hope we understand. The functional reach of the light, functional reach, not the physical reach. There is a difference. In physical reach of the sun's rays is hardly 20 meters, but the functional reach is around up till 200 meters. Why 200 meters? Because at the bottom of 200 meters also the sun rays or the heat will be available for the biotic community to survive and use it. That's why we say functional reach or functional penetration. So this depth is treated as a demarcation line for continental shelf. In some areas, this depth will be far, far wider. Some areas, this depth may be achieved at a much smaller area. That's why the width of the continental shelf varies. It may vary from 50 to 300, even up till 400 kilometers. Why it varies? We are coming to that, right? So first the width will vary because the criteria is depth, right? Now, whenever the, let's say suppose the, just recall the plate tectonics. So along the convergent boundary, the plates will be pushing each other, right? And there will be formation of mountain. So along the convergent boundary, there will be trench very close to the continent, right? Or trench will be very close to oceanic islands also, tectonic island. So the moment you move from the continents toward the ocean in the convergent boundary, there will be quick or very steep slope, and the 200 meter depth will be finished very soon. Can we understand? Right? So the width will vary as per the type of boundaries. Width are dependent on as per the type of the boundaries or margins. Right? So along the convergent boundary, width narrow. Along the divergent boundary, wider continental shelf. And now on the surface, the boundary type will be reflected by the presence of mountains or islands. So we can say that by the side of the young fold mountains like Rockies and Andes and island arcs, narrow continental shelf. Divergent boundary, obviously wider continental shelf. Which of the ocean will have the narrowest continental shelf? You all know it. Now correlate. Why? Pacific. Because Pacific has convergent boundary. Remember Pacific Ring of Fire? This side you have Andes, Rockies, then Kuril Island, Japan and all. So they are basically all the sides, they are convergent boundary. So Pacific Ocean has narrowest continental shelf. Atlantic Ocean has widest. Open the atlas, see physical portion and try to look into the color of water. Lighter blue color indicates the width of the continental shelf. There are some marginal seas which are entirely located on continental shelf. The best example is North Sea.
फिर क्या सर्च करेंगे?
फिजिकल वर्ल्ड देख, वर्ल्ड फिजिकल ओपन करो. Now the lighter color will indicate the shallowness, shallow depth. So that's why look at it as South China Sea, East Japan Sea, East China Sea. They are the continental side portion of the island arc, where the uplifted plateau would have been formed. Do you remember that? And that areas are relatively narrow, wider, with shallow water. Right? If you look at the coastal portion of eastern portion, Atlantic coast of Americas and Europe, they are much, much wider. The convergent side of an island will have narrow continental shelf and the other side will have wider continental shelf. India is again an exception. If you look at the Western Ghat, which is generally misunderstood as mountain. So most often with this principle, students start thinking that the western coast of our country should be having narrow continental shelf, but it is having wider. The reason is different. We'll discuss that later when we discuss India. Now, since continental shelf is relatively gentler slope, two very specialized landforms are found here. One, generally projecting like peak-like feature. Another one, relatively flat tableland. This is called banks, and this is called shoals. Banks are very important fishing grounds. Shoals poses danger to navigation. Peak-like feature shoals. Obviously, if the ship is slightly deeper, then it might hit the shoal area. That might cause destruction to the ships as well. Obviously, that's not associated with Titanic. Titanic has something to do with? Huh?
I was going to say the same thing.
Titanic?
Underwater glacial rock.
That is icebergs.
Icebergs.
Icebergs. Now, since continental shelves are photic zone, rest are not. So, what will happen? The most important zone of ocean for biotic resources. Right? All types of forest water is found, seaweeds, crustaceans, fishes, whales, all variety of animals you can expect roughly in this area. Especially they will be breeding in the continental shelf. And after being breeded, sometimes they may enter into the deep sea oceans. But very often there will be, the breeding ground is this. And though minerals may be found in other zones as well, but even from mineral point of view, it is the most important zone. Now, what is the difference then? Biotic resources will be largely confined to the continental shelf, but the minerals may be found away from the continental shelf. Yet, what is the problem in these two? The fundamental difference is that it is relatively easier to exploit the minerals in the continental shelf as compared to the deep sea when the depth of the water increases. Right? So, you have to reach all the way till the bottom, which is very difficult. And technological efficiencies is still not there to exploit the resources at the depth of 4 kilometers below the ocean water, because of the weight of water will be so heavy that to take there and then come back may take huge amount of expenditure. So, mineral exploration and exploitation point of view also, the continental shelf is the most important. For example, the best example is that more than 75 to 80% of crude oil is exploited from the continental shelf area. 95% of fishes and other biotic resources derived from the ocean will come from continental shelf. Most important among the mineral zones is what we call polymetallic nodules. They are basically small pieces of rocks which contain different types of minerals. And from there you can derive that. Then is monazite sands. Which is from where we have exploitation of thorium, which can be enriched to to be used in nuclear reactors. Kerala coast in our country is world famous for the deposits of monazite sands. Continental shelf areas are basically the areas for the formation of beaches and almost all other varieties of landform. Open landforms.
Sir, polymetallic
Nodules. So what will happen because of that? They are much more famous for their scenic beauty as well. An important source of tourist attraction. You may get a question that discusses the importance of continental shelf itself. Right? When it is the most important. Almost all the water sports associated with oceanic areas will be confined to the continental shelf areas. Any example, any experience of?
Scuba diving.
Scuba diving is far deeper.
Water acting.
Hmm?
Rafting.
Rafting is associated with rivers. देखा बड़ा बड़ा वो जो नहीं याद है,
देखा वैसे नाम है।
नाम याद नहीं।
उसके बारे में गूगल भी किया था, अभी याद नहीं।
अच्छा, ढेर सारे उस तरह के स्पोर्ट्स होते हैं, मुझे भी ध्यान नहीं आ रहा। I'm also forgetting. I might have heard it several times. In fact, on a small scale, I have done it, but I'm not remembering it. Okay, जब याद आ जाएगा तो बता देना. Huh? That's the importance of continental shelf. Beaches are very important tourist attraction as well. Western coast in India is more famous for its beaches as compared to the eastern coast. Then we have continental slope, steep sided. Right? Slope is relatively much steeper. So, on this side, because of being steep, the sediments deposition will be nil. Right? What are sediments which are coming from the continental shelf area? They will be deposited over the continental shelf, and the moment they are moving into it, they'll suddenly move downward and will get deposited in the bottom of that, right, forming that continental rise. That's why basically they are barren, rocky surface. Not important from resource point of view. Very important landform is called submarine canyon. Is an important feature there. On the outer margin of continental shelf, extending into continental slope area, they are very often found along the river mouth. Indus Canyon is world famous. They are basically grooves. You can imagine it. Let's say suppose this is the continental shelf portion and this is the slope area, right? What happens generally when the rivers are there, they bring a lot of sediments, and that sediments becomes mud after being mixed with water, and they keep on rolling, and that gets deposited in the marginal area. Very slow movement, a little bit will be there, but there will be heaves of sediments deposited here, right? So what happens sometimes if there is any earthquake movement or any other very strong waves, that will push the entire sediments in one go. So what will happen when they are moving, they'll keep on cutting like this grooves, right? So instead of this slope, they'll be cut like this, and you will have much deeper valley like this. So this is called canyon, submarine canyon, which will be an important feature along the continental slope.
This peat increase of tsunami waves will increase due to this continental slopes only?
Which one?
The waves which are coming from within the sea
Mm-hmm.
in the rate of tsunami,
Mm-hmm.
the speed and height is increased due to the slopes? Slopes?
Due to shelf. The waves are basically, they will be moving with the wavelength so long the depth of the water is equivalent to the wave height. Just imagine, like for example, this is the general depth of the ocean water. Let's take it starting from sea level. So now the depth is like this, so they can easily move. The moment it is broken, so here it is stuck, so depth of the wave is there, so the water will be supplied from this side and they are stuck here. So what will happen? They will start rising, right? And after rising they will break, and they will break like this, and a rush of water into the coastal areas. Then you have continental rise. Again, not very important in many point of view. Sometimes it may be not existent as well. The continental rise is the area where the deposition of sediments takes place. Again, a gentler slope. The continental rise is a gently sloping areas formed because of the deposition of the sediments which has moved down along the continental slope, and gradually it merges with the deep sea plain. So obviously that is also a very important source of especially metallic minerals in the future, though we don't have presently the technology to exploit that resources. Till here, the portion is called continental plate. When we talk about continental plate, the continental rise, continental slope and continental shelf is an integral part of the continental plate. Beyond there is a beginning of oceanic plate or oceanic crust. So when we say generally the land water ratio is 71 to 29. You generally read land water ratio 71 to 29, but if you see continent and ocean ratio, it is 65-35. Because the large part of continent has been submerged under the water. So when we include continents, we include shelf, slope and rise as well. That's why the ratio of continent ocean will be 65-35. Land and water, it will be 71-29. Deep sea plain has very rough surface generally because they are formed by the deposition of magma, and there is no erosional activities at the bottom of the sea. So they generally have, even the plain has very lots of rough ridges and furrows, very small, but they will generally be made a very flat plain area by the finest sediment supplied from the continent. You might be surprised to hear that even the middle of the Pacific Ocean receives sediments from the continental area, but they will be very, very fine, and once they are deposited, they generally fill that ridges and furrows. So that part of deep sea plain is called abyssal plain. Can we understand it? You have trenches. Hope we have already discussed that. Trenches, mid-oceanic ridges, sea mounts, abyssal hills and guyads, now you know. So all these features are important landforms of the deep sea plain. So a plain area, that's what you call abyssal plain. Abyssal plain is the plain area which is having a rough topography but filled by the finest sediments brought by basically by wind from the continental portion, and that is deposited in the ocean.
By wind, at the surface, and then it gets.
At the surface they deposit and then it sinks gradually by meteoritic bombardment also.
So, but if there's a continental rise, which we generally observe, then there not be deposits.
Continental light, the deposition over the continental light rise is one which has already mixed with water. So above the surface also wind is blowing, and that wind will keep on carrying the sediments all the way till the middle of the ocean as well. That's why they are finest of the sediments, and they will be deposited in the middle of the ocean. That portion of the plain which is filled and flattened is called abyssal plain. Still they may have rough topography as well. Because when the magma is deposited along the mid-oceanic ridge, they are not deposited perfectly like this. They are deposited like this. So that ridges and furrows will keep on extending away from that. समझ में आ गया पूरा? अभिनव, पक्का? Write down a question. Huh? Discuss the advantage and disadvantage of political zoning of ocean water. Disadvantages of political zoning of ocean water. क्या लिखा? नहीं, उधर से पीछे से अभी ना पढ़ो. आज नए लोगों को चांस दिया जाएगा. आवाज़ बहुत दिनों से सुनी नहीं है इन लोगों की.
As per the fact that mineral resources are depriving from the continents and also dormant in some regions, new technologies are developed for exploitation of resources from oceanic waters. The importance of oceans are such that a separate convention has been signed by many countries in 1982. There are many eco-political pros and cons for such convention are as follows. Demarcation. Demarcation defines the clear boundary of a particular territory. Coastal security along the boundary prevents outsiders to enter or exploit a particular territory. Territorial waters. Economic advantage includes the exploitation of minerals and crude oil present inside the ocean. Also, port of call, that is, ports as contagious zone are major sources of income. Best example of such port is Singapore. In lieu of exploitation of bitic resources, particularly low educated and less aware fishermen, they often sometimes cross territorial zones, leading to political tensions between the nations. In search of extra minerals and trend of exploiting the oceans since the last century, there might be water wars in the future as well. To avoid such consequences and maintain the United Nations Convention for law of sea should more strictly be followed, which can be done by the participation of biggest economies such as USA, India and China.
Too lengthy introduction and too lengthy conclusion as compared to the body parts. नहीं सबा जो लोग नहीं बोलते हैं आज उनकी बारी है.
As the only planet with the atmosphere, Earth 70% of the area is mainly covered with the oceans, and the continental area is only 30% of the whole Earth's surface. As a political boundary necessary for the continental area, zoning of oceanic water is also necessary. Demarcation the boundary will lead to better relations with other countries. If there was no zoning, rival countries would have entered into the area close to the continent, and this will lead to the rise of disputes. Oceanic water consists of biotic livings as well as other resources. This would have depleted by the other countries too. Trade is one of the major source of income for the coastal countries, and if there was no zoning. Sorry. But zoning has its effect on the trade and business too. It has restricted the waterways to a limit. Zoning is necessary for a country to occupy the land area which is in the oceanic water. It would establish a view with the activities of the other ships which are entering into the zoning of a particular country. Conclusion से आगे
बॉडी पार्ट्स में भी एक ही उस वर्ड को घुमा घुमा के जलेबी की तरह तुमने ये कर दिया है। एडवांटेज लिखा, डिसएडवांटेज कहाँ है उसमें?
एक ही डिसएडवांटेज।
अच्छा, कौन सा वाला? ट्रेड का डिसएडवांटेज है?
नहीं होती जोनिंग नहीं करते हैं तो फिर जिनका ट्रेड वगैरह है, ट्रेड वगैरह जो कोस्टल सिटीज हैं तो वो ट्रेड नहीं कर पाएंगे।
नहीं, जोनिंग करने से ट्रेड को क्या लेना देना?
जोनिंग कर लेते हैं तो एडवांटेज भी चला गया।
वो तो एडवांटेज ही है ना। हाँ।
The political zoning of ocean waters has been an incredible initiative to provide for equitable distribution of marine resources provided by Mother Nature to mankind. It was done as per United Nations Convention of Law on the Seas in 1982 and came in effect from 1994. As per UN clause, ocean waters have been divided into 4 divisions. And then the political zoning provides for the following advantages. It helps in increasing sovereignty of a country over water surrounding the land, provides for efficient use of marine resources by a country to develop its economy. It helps increase the security of a country against anti-social groups like terrorists, pirates, etc. Development of ports to improve trade, and development of fisheries as a source of consumption as well as for export. But also there are significant disadvantages of subzoning, which are as follows. Availability of technology with the developed countries has provided them with an added advantage over the developing or least developed countries, further widening the socio-economic gap between them. Fishermen of developing countries often cross the ocean borders due to lack of right and positioning technology, leading to them getting caught on the other countries' territorial borders. Misuse of this zoning has been done, as observed by some countries like China, crossing its territorial waters by constructing artificial islands in the South China Sea, providing blockade to countries like Philippines and Vietnam. And the conclusion is mutual cooperation between developed and developing countries and sharing of technology can help maintain the significance of zoning and add to decreasing the rich-poor gap between countries.
Good one. Better, shabash.
Political zoning of oceanic water refers to division of oceanic water into several zones like continental slope, continental rise and high sea, on the basis of universally accepted conventions. Presently, political zoning of the oceanic water was done on the UN Clause 1982. Advantages: it demarcates exclusive region to a country through which it can carry out economic extractions of minerals and other biotic resources without any dispute with another countries. Political zoning will help in securing the security of a country. Political zoning has helped to a great extent in solving disputes regarding seawater, fire related crimes, etc. Example: India-Bangladesh seawater dispute. Political zoning helps in maintaining the efficiency of the trade transportations. Disadvantages: without any legal foundation, UN clause is not implemented successfully. Often weak countries like China, US, Britain do not accept UN clause decisions when they face adversities. It is very difficult to demarcate political zoning of the seawater in the small sea areas like that of India and Sri Lanka. Due to this difficulty and unclear demarcations, fishermen are often arrested by the different countries on the issues of fishing out of the demarcated water boundaries. Political zoning of oceanic water often leads to the disputes between different countries due to possibility of the economic resources present. Example: disputes between China and the Southeast Asian countries over the South China Sea.
conclusion part, it is true that presently political zoning of the oceanic water is of the serious concern, but with making consensus and working out on the legal aspect of the event, then problem of the political zoning of the oceanic water can be solved out.
बेटर स्ट्रक्चर अच्छा है. अब इसमें देखो क्या क्या है तुम लोग मिस कर रहे हो.
So इसमें कहते हैं कि it is not a physical boundary, so it leads to inter the zone intrusion.
That's what he has written. It's not a physical boundary is a wrong statement. It's a physical boundary, but physical boundary cannot be visually established. So that's what create confusion. हाँ, visual उसका demarcation नहीं हो सकता है. But with the technology like using GPS and all, you can solve that issue. Even for fishermen, you can have those who can travel all the way 20 to 30 nautical miles deep in the ocean. They can purchase GPS as well. They must be having very big fishing trawlers. So the owner who can use fishing trawlers, they can use GPS also. It's not like the small boat fishing in the small.
Example which can be written between Sri Lanka and India. We use trawlers. They are complaining regarding.
No, exactly. The technological efficiency and inefficiency is creating a problem between the countries as well.
There's a general statement that developed countries have more technology and hence they have more advantage.
So we are not among the developed countries. Yeah, we can think so, but we are not at developed countries. Like Sri Lankans are definitely not nowhere before us, but the major problem is not because of that technology. Major problem is the capacity to exploit and the demarcation. Because the shape of Sri Lanka is this, we are like this, so we have much greater and longer coastline and deeper water. They don't have, so that's why they keep on complaining about it. And since the like legal binding, you have written a very good point about that. It's not legally binding at the international forum, because it's not about intra-state disputes where legal procedures can be made and all. Since it is an international convention, and it is simply a convention, not a legal listing, that creates a problem for it. Right? So first, if you start with the, like for example, when you introduce it, you should introduce with respect to oceanic demarcation, like zoning or the importance of ocean, not in the present but in the coming years for humans, especially with the depleting resources. Some of you have started with that. I think about अभिनव तुम शुरू किए थे, बड़ा लंबा हो गया था, लेकिन उतना नहीं करना था. ठीक है, उसके बाद डायरेक्ट एडवांटेजेस पे आ जाओ. अब एडवांटेजेस में क्या है, यू थिंक अबाउट इट व्हेन इट इज पॉलिटिकली डिमार्केटेड, दैट मीन्स ओनरशिप राइट इज गिवन टू a country, right? When you have ownership right, then you start thinking things as if it is your own, right? So when you are owning it, then you take measures to protect it. You take measures for sustainability. You issue and generate legal aspects. So that ecological aspect is more sustainable. So basically you can start with protection, regeneration and recycling measures can be properly granted, leading to sustainable exploitation of the resources. Right, eco-friendly exploitation. Over-exploitation can be checked. Then you have establishment of coastal security can be ensured. Here you can write all the like not only the external countries but also the small pirates and criminal activities, because you know that it is your own. So the moment any entry is there, entry can be checked. That means unwanted entry can be checked away from the habitable zones. Then interstate disputes has decreased. Greater parity between the developed and developing and underdeveloped countries. Relative, by same extension you can have relative equitable distribution of resources.
So greater parity between the
Developed, developing and underdeveloped countries. Like even Mozambique and, or for example Rwanda, Somalia, Kenya can ascertain that the resources belong to them. And if they cannot exploit, at least they can sell the right to others to earn money. The problem is generally finding the disadvantages. Look at the disadvantages. Like again we say that equitable distribution is there, but length of the coastline with the varying continental shelf, width of the continental shelf and the length of the coastline, some countries have much greater advantage as compared to the others. Landlocked countries are at disadvantageous position. Efficient utilization of resources, especially by relatively underdeveloped and the resource-rich countries. The best example of underdeveloped is Kenya and Somalia. Inefficient utilization of resources. Right? Best example of resource-rich countries is Argentina. Argentina, along the coastal areas of Argentina, we have one of the most important fishing grounds. But Argentina does not exploit it with that ratio, basically because most of the country population are basically meat eaters. Because of Pampas, I hope you remember that, Pampas. So that because of the possession of Pampas, they have good amount of animal husbandry. Consequently, they are one of the largest producer of meat. So they consume and export meat and meat products rather than going for exploitation of the fishes and marine resources. then obviously good number of countries have not accepted it. Best example is USA. That obviously doesn't ensure a complete application of the convention. No legal provision to bind the countries to implement convention resulting into or leading to excessive exploitation of the excessive exploitation by the major countries, putting the smaller countries at disadvantageous situation. Leading to disputes like South China Sea, Indian Ocean. Then some of you have already written about that demarcation, proper demarcation is not possible. Then closed countries always indulge in disputes where the width of water is not very big. The Strait of Gibraltar itself is a very good example. Pak Strait is an example. Creeks between India and Pakistan are examples. Right? Open the atlas. Hypsographic curve. The curve is called hypsographic curve. The curve which delineate the height over the continent as well as depth in the ocean. That is called hypsographic curve. Like you may have a question, draw a hypsographic curve to show the Indian Ocean rim. So you'll have to draw all that curve. But that will be in option, not in GS.
Second point,
Landlocked countries are at disadvantaged position. Like for example, Nepal, Bhutan, they don't have access to oceans. That means they don't possess ocean resources. So the demarcation should include them as well, but that has not included. Longer coastline like Russia, Japan, USA, Canada has much longer coastline extending into the Arctic Ocean as well. So obviously they are at an advantageous position. They are not divided on the basis of population also. Like some countries may have very small population. For example, Norway has a much longer coastline. Conclusion वही होगा. Basically, you start with that. The UN Convention is a very important step, yet it has certain loopholes. विद द कॉपरेशन, जैसे इसमें तुमने सुल्ताना लिखने की कोशिश करी है उसको डेवलप्ड एंड डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज का कॉपरेशन के साथ, वी शुड ट्राई टू रिजॉल्व द डिस्प्यूट एंड देयर शुड बी अ प्रॉपर मैकेनिज्म फॉर इट इन द फ्यूचर सो दैट वी डोंट हैव एनी डिस्प्यूट्स. अ प्रॉपर डिस्प्यूट सेटलमेंट मैकेनिज्म शुड बी डेवलप्ड. उस तरह से हम कंक्लूजन इसमें लिख सकते हैं. मोरक्को, अल्जीरिया, ट्यूनीशिया, लिबिया, इजिप्ट, सूडान, Eritrea, Djibouti, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, South Africa, Namibia, Angola, DRC, Congo, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, Cameroon, Nigeria, Benin, Togo, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Gambia, Senegal, Mauritania, Western Sahara. Western Sahara, Mauritania, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Togo, Benin, Nigeria, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Congo, DRC, Angola, Namibia, South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, Kenya, Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, Sudan, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco. Largest country of Africa? Most populous? Nigeria. Open the atlas and see the physical part and just have a glimpse in the process of the rest of the countries located in the interior. Physical part, we'll start with the Atlas Mountain in the northwestern part. You can sit with someone, Abhishek.
सर पनिशमेंट जो होगी वो अकॉर्डिंग टू द लॉ ऑफ लैंड, ये भी डिसएडवांटेज में इंक्लूड कर सकते हैं?
कर सकते हैं अगर चाहें हम तो वैसे नहीं स्ट्रॉन्ग पॉइंट हो सकता है, लेकिन उसको लिखने का तरीका अगर अच्छा होगा तो दैट कैन बी अ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग पॉइंट. लाइक व्हेन इंटरनेशनल सिटीजन्स, लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल यू कैन गिव, इफ यू हैव एनफ अमाउंट ऑफ स्कोप, तो जैसे इटालियन मैरिनर्स है तो अब कैपिटल पनिशमेंट उसके यहाँ नहीं होता है. दो सोसाइटीज आर रिलेटिवली मोर एडवांस, दे हैव डन अवे विद द कैपिटल पनिशमेंट. तो कैपिटल पनिशमेंट एक टॉर्चुअस मोमेंट हो जाएगा पूरी कंट्री के लिए उसके. दैट मे बी अ सेंटिमेंटल एस्पेक्ट, so that may lead to further problems in terms of relationship between the countries. Agar India has been strongly following that case, so that guy would have been executed by now, or at least given death sentence. So that death sentence would have definitely created furor in Italy. That means Italy-India relationship might have been affected very badly. So that is definitely a good point. But the way you choose words to express that will determine whether it is a very strong point or not. Sometimes it may be considered as human rights violation. Atlas Mountain, contemporary of Himalaya and all. The Young Fold Mountain है वहाँ पे. You can see. Ahaggar Plateau. Ahaggar Plateau. Mount Tahat is the highest peak of that region, Sahara Desert. राइट साइड बढ़ते जाओ. हाँ सेम है, छोटा बड़ा है वो. Come to Nile River. Obviously all of you must have read that Egypt is supposed to be gift of Nile, the most adventurous hydroelectricity project in a desert, Aswan Dam. Engineer's nightmare it is called. Aswan Dam. In a desert it tried to, one of the best example of ecological disaster. When you read in ecology environment, that part will be one of the best example of that. Look at Blue Nile, White Nile, the longest river of the world, all the way coming from Lake Victoria, largest freshwater lake of Africa, Lake Victoria, near equator.
ये ब्लू नाइल और व्हाइट नाइल है वो current-
ट्रिब्यूटरी है, खरतूम के पास मिलती है ये।
मतलब ये करंट की वजह से नाम दिया गया या फिर वैसे ही?
क्या जरूरत है, यूपीएससी नहीं पूछेगी, ये पक्का पता है। चीजें जो एक्चुअल में पढ़ने वाली वो कम है क्या, जो और इसको बढ़ाया जाए। At least till you qualified, try to avoid these temptations. एक मैं क्लास ले रहा था कहीं पे, तो I was discussing about that rotation and devolution और हिंदी मीडियम में बात हो रही थी। तो एक बच्चा मुझसे पूछता, सर वो सब तो समझ गए, लेकिन पृथ्वी घूमती क्यों है ये बताइए। तो अब क्यूरियोसिटी बहुत होती है, उसमें उस बच्चे की भी गलती नहीं है, लेकिन ट्राई टू अवॉइड दैट टेम्पटेशन। अब घूमती क्यों है तो ऊपर वाला ही जानेगा, उसके लिए फिर मरना पड़ेगा, तब जाके पूछना पड़ेगा भैया घुमाते क्यों है इसको। लेकिन टेम्पटेशन यूपीएससी में इतने सारे एरियाज आते हैं आपके पास कि एट दिस एज डेफिनेटली यू आर वेरी क्यूरियस, तो यू आर टेम्पटेड टू लर्न एवरीथिंग। तो इतना ज्यादा ऑलरेडी है पढ़ने के लिए, बिकॉज वेरी ऑफन यू विल हियर दैट इट इज इक्वली इम्पोर्टेंट to learn what not to read than what to read. Sometimes it is more important to learn that. तो जितना हम लोग पढ़ रहे हैं ये एक्चुअल में रिक्वायरमेंट से एटलीस्ट 20% ज्यादा है। ऑब्वियसली विद द बिलीफ के क्वेश्चंस नहीं छूटे, इसलिए 20% ऑलरेडी ज्यादा पढ़ रहे हैं, उसको 10% और क्यों बढ़ाया जाए। Then you look at here, Khartoum is a confluent city, capital of Sudan, and there also you have a very important dam. Could you find it? एक डैम है, हाँ, White Nile Dam. That's also close to Khartoum. Look at Congo River, left in the middle, that's also known as Zaire River. Congo, the largest river of Africa, crossing the equator twice. Crossing the equator twice means it keeps on roaming along the equator, which receives very high amount of rainfall. Hence the volume of water is very high. Stanley Falls and Stanley Reservoir. Then look at Niger River, left of that, coming from Futajalon mountain. Try to mix it up with political as well, which country it is passing through. Futajalon. Extreme southwestern part, Futajalon mountain. You can see Adamawa plateau. Adamawa in Nigeria, very famous for tin production. Adamawa. Then you can see Katanga Plateau. Katanga Plateau in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. World famous for copper. copper. It has gold and diamond as well. All the resource-rich countries are experiencing lot of conflicts, inner conflicts. Like there is a civil war going on in DRC. South Africa is fortunate enough to get out of it. Zimbabwe. Then you have Mount Cameroon. Only active volcano of Africa. एक और उगा है वो वहीं पे है, माउंट कैमरून का ही पार्ट. ओनली एक्टिव वॉल्केनो ऑफ अफ्रीका एज अ कॉन्टिनेंट. Just below you have Katanga below, a river. A river
Only active volcano.
in Africa. Congo से नीचे कटांगा है, कटांगा से नीचे Zambezi. Zambezi, Victoria waterfall. Remember, this is the major river entering into Indian Ocean. Can we say Okavango Delta? A very unique name basically, because delta is basically a feature in the water bodies, mainly in the oceanic area, but this is in the interior of the continent. Namib Desert. Near Namib Desert you have Okavango Delta, right side of Namib Desert. नामीबिया, अंगोला. फिजिकल में देख रहे हो? ओकावांगो, OKAVANGO, ओकावांगो. हाँ, ओकावांगो swamps or Okavango Delta. It's the most famous swampy area of Africa. Then you have Great Kalahari Desert and Karoo Desert. Karoo is a small one on the leeward side of Drakensberg. And in the middle you have High Veld. High Veld is a very famous temperate grassland of South Africa, world famous for merino sheep, the best quality sheep. Karoo Desert. Pampas, temperate grassland, just like Pampas. The region is very famous for merino sheep. The best quality wool is produced from there. Swartberg and Drakensberg, Cape of Good Hope, right there in South Africa. South Africa is world famous for gold and diamond. Whole Africa is highly deficient in coal resources, one of the important reason for lack of industrialization. It doesn't have coal except few, but the deepest colliery of the world is in Zimbabwe, that is called Wankie Colliery. WANKIE, Wankie Colliery is the deepest coal mine of the world. The deepest diamond mine is also in South Africa.
The deepest coal mine in Zimbabwe.
In Zimbabwe. Swartberg, Drakensberg. Drakensberg area is very famous for gold mining. Next is the Rift Valley, East African Rift Valley, the longest rift valley of the world, starting from Lake Malawi, Lake Tanganyika. Major lakes, except Lake Victoria, which is a freshwater lake, all the other lakes are brackish water lake, saline lakes, salty lakes. Starting from Lake Malawi all the way to Tanganyika, Rudolph, Turkana, to Red Sea, and then Dead Sea. There may be in the corner, there might be a satellite image kind of thing which shows the Rift Valley alone. Most of the atlas has that. Tanganyika, Rudolph, Turkana,
only part of equator which is snow covered.
Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro is Tanzania is the highest peak of, मैंने ही लिखा है वो. That Kilimanjaro is the part of Tanzania, the highest peak of Africa, and that is the only region in equator all over the world which is snow covered. Along the equator it is very difficult to have snow covered, and so that's why it becomes very unique in that sense, but because of its height.